Okay, welcome back everybody. We are starting a new chapter this week. Exciting. Perek Lamed Aleph. We learned Lamed, we're starting Lamed Aleph. I just want to point out actually before we begin that after the class last week, when I was thinking about Acher, Elisha ben Avuya, which is Elisha ben Avuya, for that matter we have even in the a statement from him in the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos that famous statement of someone learning Torah in his young age as opposed to his older age, and also from where someone learns his Torah, etc. But if you learn from somebody who's learning Torah at different ages and different stages in one's life, as he compares it to the niyar, the paper, parchment, paper, and so on. Like I say, the famous Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, it comes from Elisha ben Avuya, and he was this great Talmud. He was naturally a Tanya. For that matter, he was a Tanya. When I walked out, I noticed that he lived the era right after Rabbi Akiva. You notice that the mistake I made, I forget even what did I say? In any case, that he was after the time of, he was a Talmud. He was Mekabel from Rabbi Akiva, famous Rabbi Akiva. And this was a different, I forget which, another Tanya, Meir, if I'm not mistaken. He still always appreciated his scholarship, even though he became this heretic, and he did certain things overtly against not only Yiddishkeit but against his fellow brothers as Yidden as well. And in areas like very grave areas, he tattletaled them. And this is again different parts of the Gemara which definitely frustrated and angered HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because he really crossed very together with his scholarship and knowledge, which was vast and great. And again, you see that it was being taken advantage even after he turned to this Acher. For that matter, that's the reason why he was named Acher, because they didn't even want to dignify him with it. In other words, there's the other reasons also. It was a real, I'm not going to go into it right, it was a real deriding name, Acher. But also like the other, he's not aligned with who he was, so Elisha ben Avuya. And again, together with, he was so scholarly and so knowledgeable that it was taken advantage of. His knowledge was taken advantage of. It was attempted to be taken advantage of even after he became Acher, after he crossed these important barriers, important lines. But again, he did things which were not only reflected in his own non-commitment to the service of God, service of allegiance with Torah and mitzvahs, but much more than that. He was, like I say, he did things which had very severe consequences, physical consequences on his own brothers and sisters, his own community, his own Am Yisrael. And again, this is why the Hashem was, and again, the famous story that he was riding in a donkey or a camel on Yom Kippur in the area where in the area of the Harabais, I think it was, around the Harabais, because he did certain things which were lahachis to anger Hashem. And in any case, so we mentioned these Gemaras, but he was in that era. He was a generation right after Rabbi Akiva. In any case, so this is where we left off, that even the problem what Hashem had, what Hashem didn't want to Hashem didn't accept him, or like it says that everybody's welcome to do tshuva. I mentioned about that Baskel, that heavenly statement, that everybody was welcome to do tshuva, to the exclusion of Acher. Even though it says Eimach Dov Hashem L'Knei Tshuva, it had to be something. It wasn't the regular tshuva. He didn't have the accessibility to just tap into the regular tshuva, because Hashem was upset. And why was Hashem so upset? There's many people who sinned, did the very grave sins. So this is what he said, that Hashem was upset because Yoda B'chvedi, he had a vast knowledge in the glory, the honor of Hashem, and therefore he knew what it was all about, and yet he took those steps. That's what intensified the Chaninah of Hashem, the anger, the wrath of Hashem. So this is what Rabbi equates this. He brings this Gemara, he brings this Ma'amid Azal, is saying that our sages in the context of the greater what one an individual is. We should never equate ourselves. Oh, that bum on the street, who is he? And so on. Hashem doesn't look like that. Hashem looks like you're somebody who is part of. You feel you invested a lot in your service to God. You became this who. You constantly seek that closeness, that to cleave and to become closer and closer with your Creator. It says kirvas elikim yachvas, we mentioned. Basically means that we're looking for, the individual is looking. He considers himself, and he truly is someone who invested heavily in his Avodas Hashem, in his service to God, and he seeks a closeness to God, and a sentimental closeness. He wants to have that closeness to God. So don't compare. This is where Hashem says your smaller sins, or you consider smaller sins, perhaps very grave sins. All this which we mentioned, the different examples that Rabbi gave, and Asay Tev, how much diligent you are with learning Torah, doing mitzvahs, giving tzedakah how much you can. In other words, all these small wars, or let's call battles, or challenges which you have, which is not comparison. Again, we're not going to repeat everything that Rabbi said in Perek Lamed. But is it in comparison to that challenge of the guy sitting in the marketplace? If you start comparing challenges and what is more fierce war, things which are not as fierce as that individual, the war, the battle, and the challenges that individual has, he pretty much lacks about it. And also the Alter Rebbe brought in not only in Sasei but even Sumeira, even this which we have to stay away from, which many times we give the picture of. We classify the frumiyid as somebody, I stay away from that, and I don't eat that, and I don't. Even in the known, this is what you're not supposed to do. That's what Rebbe points out, again, in the very last week's class, that even there are certain areas which we're not necessarily careful in, and this is where that bothers HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You're someone who is part of it, and you believe yourself is a frumiyid, and you did invest in your service to God, so don't equate yourself in that. Yeshvei Kronis, the individual is sitting on the out in the marketplace, which is challenges are so different than yours. You got to realize that because you're someone who knows Nefesh's honor, you do have a very beautiful relationship with God, or your relationship with God is a relationship which you only want to enhance. You consider yourself someone who always wants to have that kirvas elikim as a result of your investments in Avodas Hashem. You have to be extra careful. Even more careful, and be kifli kiflaim. The Alter Rebbe says even in double and quadruple and even beyond that matters how much whatever you do matters to the Almighty. And again, this is all I'm just repeating this because just a little bit of a background, historical background of Aharon, which was
is the Rambam here?
No, this is Tanya, and again, which we mentioned last week. I'm repeating it just to a little background on the story with Acher, on the reason, and again a little background on who he was and why Hashem, the expression is a Yoda Bichveidi. What is that Yoda Bichveidi? And yet he went astray. Rahman al-Islam. So again, I just want to always, as I usually repeat, one is always welcome to see the previous classes on Kosher Tube, which is they host this class, and you could always in the link box look for Tanya. You see the previous classes, but if you want to see a little more structured, and there's a whole website dedicated to this class, which is dedicated to Tanya, solely Tanya, and namely the advantage that it has it with the text, which is tanyaonline.com. You have every class, which is pretty much within 24 hours after it's put up on the main site, which is koshertube.com. It is transferred over again with the text on tanyaonline.com. So all these previous classes are naturally on, and at this point we will begin Perek Lamed Aleph. Behine, af im kishiyari charbel hami binyanim eilu binyanim hanal kisho shtayim liz benim yichasuruch v'lev nishber yavel liatzus dela. So what is this leading me? The Alter Rebbe says, Beinani, you're telling Beinani, of all this, which he can be and he's perhaps not, you're putting so many things in perspective. The Alter Rebbe says, Binyanim Melu, it's in Chavtes, you're telling him the reasons why. He has a blockage in his heart, the Eid Hashem, the godly light doesn't penetrate, doesn't flow nicely within his system. With all the reasons with Alter Rebbe explained in the 29th chapter, which everybody's welcome to look into the 29 chapters again in these previous classes, these above mentioned websites, and then Perek Lamed, Alter Rebbe says, put things again in perspective. How you doing with your Asay Tov? How you doing to overcome those struggles, those challenges which you don't pay the adequate attention to, and Hashem is bothered by it. And the lashon over here, Ashmasik Deila, his culpability is great and much greater, and so much greater than the average person. So one would think and ponders and contemplates. Now this above mentioned, Binyonim Hanal, all this mentioned above, for a while he elaborates on this genuinely and be'emes, truly true reflection, and in a very structured and a healthy way and in an honest way. So and this would naturally go along with a broken heart, a down spirit, or as in the order over here, a down spirit and a broken heart. What would it lead to? Apparently lead to perhaps depression, right? Melancholy. And this is there's a problem over here. Because atzvus, which is depression or melancholy, doesn't go along. We mentioned this in the past, and we know it doesn't go along with the Avodas Hashem, with serving God. Service to God must be performed. The service must be performed or actualized in a way and together with simcha gdela, great joy, elation, gladness of heart, like the pasuk says, Tachas shelavat Hashem alikecha. Excuse me, the simcha v'tuv levav. They didn't serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The famous pshat of that Arizal teaches the pasuk not that you took advantage of the good stuff, but you didn't serve. Your service itself was not b'simcha, and that's a problem. A yid has to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu with simcha, with joy. And when a person thinks about these two chapters, 29, 20, but namely the 29th and 30th chapter, these messages will come across in the earlier chapters, namely these last two chapters. If he's only honest, he comes to it. It's inevitable that one would come to atzvus gdela, especially michas haruach v'leiv nishbar, a broken spirit, a down spirit, or broken heart. He would come to not only atzvus lashon Alter Rebbe, he comes to great state of sadness or downness, if you will, or depression even. Like I say, I use depression. I always say, I feel always it's just too much a strong word, because depression is sometimes it borders not only a certain feeling, but sometimes it borders health. It's a sign of perhaps a health issue. Sometimes, the core expression or word or experience of depression. See, someone's depressed, he needs medication. Now, I refrain sometimes using the word depression, but let's perhaps, use it just to understand, to leave it in this context, that it would bring a person severely down if he only ponders and reflects and retrospects in this very fashion, which the Alter Rebbe explains and lays out for this Beinoni. It would perhaps bring atzvus gdela, and that could be a concern. Be a problem. It is perhaps a problem. So Alter Rebbe says, "Lo yachosh, don't worry about it." What do you mean, don't worry about it? So Alter Rebbe explains. Even though Vavsha Atzvus instead of Klipas Nega, Atzvus on its own comes from Klipas Nega, which means V'lei Mitzad HaKdusha, which means Atzvus is not associated with holiness, which is generally a good rule. Many people think that they're so milsav and they're so down, and they demonstrate their downness. They feel that's another expression of their piety. Like too much of a smile or too much joy is it's too much for me as a yid. I gotta humble myself. Not only humble myself inwardly, b'pnimiyusi, in a pnimizdik way, in an inward way. Sometimes a person feels he has to be down and never smile and so on. Perhaps, sometimes you find it precisely by the From Yid, and we should always know it's a terrible thing. It's not true, and it's not good, and it's not healthy. It doesn't belong in Avodas Hashem, because there's nothing holy to atzvos. And he says you can't call it like putting on the light on Shabbos, or eating something which is clearly unkosher, which Hashem says do not consume. This is a clear Aveda. Something to say, Atzvus, oh, did I cross that grave line, the line into Shalosh Klippus Hatmeyes, which is the more severe and grave level of impurity, which we have discussed in the past, very clearly and explicitly, which is basically every Aveda, every sin, violation, transgression, is connected to the lowest level of impurity, which is called Shalosh Klippus Hatmeyes. You can't say that someone is me'utzav, someone is sad or depressed right away. He's like someone who dropped into that zone, into that domain. No, it's not. But on the other hand, holy it's not as well, as we know. It's pretty unholy, the whole expression of atzvus. Right? It says, Oiz v'chedva mimkaimei. I was going to quote this as well. That there has to be strength, mimkaimei, in the place of God, which means in the domain of God, which is really the domain of every Yid, because every Yid serves HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu means you're in the domain, you're in your relation, you're on duty in your relationship with God, so you're in God's domain, in your expression, that is, in your Avedus Hashem. That's the Mikaim Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What does it say? Chedva. It has to be joy, it has to be elation. So Atzvus is certainly not holy. So what is it? So the Rebbe defines it's Klippas Nega. It's an intermediate level of Klippa, which is not as grave as Shalosh Klippus Hatmeyes, which is really a drop in the very impure areas. But it's kind of this neutral Klippa because it's not Kedusha. But in this context, the Alter Rebbe is saying it's still Klippa. How can I tell you Lo Yachush? How can I tell the person don't worry? He's kind of asking the question himself. What does it mean Lo Yachush? How can I tell the person do not be concerned? Don't worry. Excuse me. The Atzvus comes from Klippas Nega, and it comes from Klippas Nega. It doesn't come from Kedusha, because in equals it b'tzad Kedusha, on the side of Kedusha it's Eiz v'chedva b'mkeimei. It's to be strength, b'mkeimei, in the place, in the domain of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and it has to be chedva. There has to be joy. There has to be elation. And the mkeimei is in the domain of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in this context, and is where I am. When I am in the domain of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which means when I express my service to the Almighty, when I relate, I stand in a relationship with the Almighty, which is again via my service, my learning Torah, doing mitzvahs and so on. What is it? It has to be chedva. And that's only Kedusha. Atzvus is not Kaddish. So if it's not Kaddish, it's pretty bad, right? It's at the lowest level. It's not like I bit into something which is clearly treif, something which is unkosher. Then a person drops into the world of Shalosh Klippus Hatmeyes, but it's still not Kaddish, and if something is not Kaddish, it's pretty severe and grave. Very severe and grave. Klippas Nega. It's not Kedusha. And as the Gemara says in Ashchina Shedel Metich Simcha, the divine presence only dwells via Simcha. It says even the Nevi'im. Even the Nevi'im, Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Shakel Ni Bidvari. Excuse me. So even the Nevi'im, the prophecies, when they were seeking prophecy, it says the Heilchim Lashon of the Rambam, they went in the ways of Nevuah. When they were seeking prophecy, they had even instruments, musical instruments, playing in front of them, in order that they should elevate themselves to a state, they should stand in a state of elation and joy, in order to be a vessel, in order to be a keli, a conduit, in which to receive and transmit Hashem's the nevuah, the prophecy which they have received from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But namely, in this context, would be the receiving. The Shekhinah should be Sheira, the divine presence should dwell within them. That was only B'tech Simcha. And he gives the example of the Nevi'im, their formal progress and process of them pursuing nevuah. But it's a general statement that if you want the Shiras HaShechina, you want the dwelling of the Shechina, it can't be Metech Atzvus. God doesn't like the Atzev, doesn't like the melancholy, doesn't like the downness, which is generally, I'd say this parenthetically, but it's not so much parenthetically. It's the message as well, but it's not the Rebbe's message. Whatever one thinks that he means, he thinks that he's just going to be down in fear of a smile, in fear of a simcha, a basic a thread of simcha, and sever panim yafes, and enjoy in the Avodas Hashem if he thinks that it can't be, and he has to always stand, for kvetched, shall he know it has nothing to do with God and nothing to do with godliness. And getting back over here directly to the context with Alter Rebbe is pointing out over here again, bringing this Gemara, the Shechina Sheida L'mitech Simcha. And it's not only, it's interesting, many times it says whenever it says Ein Ella, it's with a greater emphasis. It doesn't say that the Shechina is Sheida, dwells mitech simcha. It says Eina Shechina Sheida Ella mitech simcha. If you want the Shechina, it ought to be through simcha. That's where there's Asheras Shechina, the dwelling of the Shechina, of the divine presence. And the same thing when you're dealing with about halacha, learning Torah has to be mitech simcha. So the question is, how can I tell the individual, La Yachash, don't worry? And more so, it's almost inevitable that he's going to lead him to Atzos if he thoroughly learns these few chapters, again, namely the last two chapters, Chavtes, 29, and Lamed. If he's only a structured thinker and someone who reflects with structure, honesty, and integrity, he's going to lead him. It's probably going to lead him to Atzvus, even as he was Atzvus G'dayla. If you really ponder on the messages of the previous chapter in Chavtes and Lamed, it's going to lead. So how can I tell you La Yachush? How can I tell you don't worry about it and don't be concerned about it if it comes from Klippas Nega? So the Alter Rebbe reconciles and answers. He says, you should know that the truth of the matter is Atzvus on its own, it's not Kaddish. What does it come from? It comes from Klippas Nega. If you remember, when we translated and when we dealt with Klippas Nega, if you remember, we mentioned what is Klippas Nega. Why is Klippas Nega different than Shalosh Klippas Atmeis?
Then what?
Then the Shalosh Klippas Atmeis means the lower level of impurity, the lowest level of impurity, which we call Shalosh Klippas Atmeis, which is called Shalosh Klippas Atmeis. Why is it different? If it's not Kedusha, what differentiates that with Shalosh Klippas Atmeis? And we answered, and when we explained then the difference, in the previous chapter, starting from chapter 6, if you remember, that is where the Alter Rebbe introduces the notion of Klippas Nega, or the exact wording of Klippas Nega is in chapter 7, So there, we explained that the Klippas Nega means it's a Klippa. Klippa means to say it is associated with the forces of impurity, but yet Nega means there's a bit of light. There's a little bit of light, as opposed to Shalosh Klippas Atmeis is absolute darkness. There is no light, there's no even thread of light, and we say light in this context of Kedusha, of holiness. As opposed to Klippas Nega, the Nega means light. So there's a thread of light, and therefore you can search the light, seek for the light, look out for the light, pursue the light, try to expand the light, and perhaps transform this whole Klippas Nega to become a ally to Kedusha, or transform it to Kedusha itself. So I'll give you a few examples. An example, take an apple. And its own, the apple's not Kaddish, it's not holy. You can't say it's like a mezuzah. Doesn't mean because you can eat it does it become holy. Not at all. It's neutral. This is the idea of something which is in neutrality. You can go ahead, you can go forward, and you can go backward. Right? You can progress and you could digress. That's the whole point of something which is neutral. And in this case also, an apple, it's not holy, but if I eat it, and I make a bracha on it, and I eat it with a holy intention, with a holy purpose, means to say, when I eat it, I'm looking for the strength in order, because I have to do a certain mitzvah, and I have to, for example, bring some bags to some poor people, and I need some strength, and take an apple. I said, I'm going to go for the next hour to deliver these important packages to the poor, and this is one of the greatest mitzvahs which we have, the mitzvah of tzedakah, especially you do it begufa, with your own efforts, and your own money, or even with your own efforts. Begufa, you go out, you deliver, and you make people happy. Especially the poor, the destitute, but I'm weak, I had a hard day, so you grab an apple and you make a brach on it, you say, I'm going to use the strength that the apple is going to give me in order to do the mitzvah. So what you did was, the apple on its own, it's not Kedusha. If it's not Kedusha, it's Klippa. The only thing is, it doesn't come from the Shalosh Klippas Atmeis, the lowest level of impurity, which there's absolute darkness, there's no light. Here there is a thread of light that I can find, extract, and transform, and make the light take over the whole object. And in this case, if I do it with a godly purpose, with a divine and noble purpose. I'm going to deliver, I'm going to help the poor, the destitute, and I need the strength, and I make a brach on it. So first of all, just by making the first thing, you made a brach on it. So the light, the little nega within it expanded, and then I eat it l'shem shamayim, for the godly sake, and I follow through with a shamayim, which means with a godly, I go ahead and I implement this which I had intended to eat the apple for. In other words, my intention in eating the apple was to give me the strength to do something good. In other words, I follow through with the shamayim, I follow through with this godly act. What I did was I expanded the light, the nega, the light within the klipas nega more and more, to the extent that it completely, the light took over the object completely, and now the apple, as in the lashon of the Alter Rebbe, became like a sacrifice. It became like a sacrifice on the holy altar. If you look about what was the sacrifice ultimately? It was a physical animal. But a physical animal is also klipas nega before, because someone could eat even a kosher animal and indulge in it without a godly purpose. So as remember that itself, he's bringing down the energy of the apple. He didn't seek and he didn't extract the light. Quite on the contrary, whatever light there was, he submerged the light into the darkness, into the klipa dimension of this animal, of this meat of the animal, because he ate it. And if he didn't make a bracha, even if he did make a bracha, but he overly indulged without a purpose, like expression in Torah is called zolel v'sovei. He doesn't eat it. He just eats it for the sake, just in a fulfilling and an animalistic lust and pleasure. Then you covered up the light, the little light which was there, which you could make a bracha and eat it for a godly purpose. You covered it up, and therefore it falls into shalosh kubzat meis, at least for a part time till you do tshuva and so on, like the Alter Rebbe elaborated in those very prakim 7, 8, etc. But when I do something good with it, it's similar to the same. We're getting back to that animal. When I bring it as a sacrifice on the holy altar, so that very same animal, right, which was neutral, just klipas nega means it was in the overall, it was klipa, but it had a nega and a bit of light. I extracted that light, I expounded that light, and that light took over the whole reality, the whole identity of the animal. The animal becomes, according to Torah, becomes like a davar kaddish, like something holy. So I can do the same with even an apple. As this lashon of Alter Rebbe there, the apple itself becomes ka'ayla ka'karban, becomes like a sacrifice. Remember, we said within sacrifices at different levels, ayla is the climactic demonstration of complete self-sacrifice to God, because we know from the ayla, and the ayla itself cannot be eaten. Nothing of the ayla is eaten. Everything is sacrificed on the altar. That's why it's called ola. It ascends to God completely. That's basically what I'm doing when I eat an apple, l'shem shamayim. I extracted the light and expanded the light and expounded on the light, and I made the light be the whole dominant force in this apple based on my movements or the way I dealt with this apple. I made a bracha and I ate it for the godly purpose, and I followed suit. My godly purpose followed suit. I did something godly, divine, sacred for that matter, with the energy of the apple. So what I did is the whole light, a little thread of light was expounded to the extent that it took over, it transformed the entire apple, and now the entire apple becomes like a sacrifice. So why and in this context, now Rebbe is saying that we say atzvos is not kod, it's just a terrible thing. The Shekhinah, the divine presence doesn't well into it, true, but you should know that the atzvos, when the atzvos itself, the sadness, is not because I'm missing some parnasa or anything, any physical disturbance which is bringing me down, which is making me depressed perhaps, but it's from a godly problems, or it's from godly reflections on my godly relationship with God, or my godly act, my mili dishmai, which means ideas which are heavenly ideas, in my relationship with heaven, my relationship with God, and I feel there are blemishes or there are problems in my mili dishmaya, in my relationship with the Almighty. So there, it's michinas teif shebenega, which means that is directly connected to the light, the thread of light which exists in klipas nega. In other words, that I don't have to find it so much, or it's not like that it's submerged and I have to go find it and seek it and look for it like I'm biting into an apple, because in the end of the day, an apple is consuming an apple is a physical act, and many times we can eat the apple without a godly sake, even when we do make a bracha. And we use the strength with which we receive through, let's say, eating this apple or any other food which is kosher, which is again part of the klipas nega. Because it's a physical, engaging in the physical, so the taiv shebenega, or the nega, the light or the good which exists within the nega, is not so apparent. But if my whole reflection is because of mili dishmaya, is because of I feel that there is inconsistencies or perhaps even blemishes in my relationship with heaven, which means with my relationship with God as a Jew, then, and that leads to this atzvus which we mentioned, so then it's already coming from the taiv shebenega. The light is much more apparent on the outset. And this is why the Alter Rebbe is telling us over here that la yachush, don't worry, that if this will lead you to atzvus, because in this case it's not the regular expression of klipas nega. You're directly touching and tapping into the taiv shebenega, the good which exists in the nega, because the whole atzvos, your being down, is not because you reflected on any physical state, but reflected on a spiritual state. And I just want to conclude over here that the Alter Rebbe later is going to even tell us, and make it clear, B'ez Hashem, as we'll learn in the following week, which is very important. I say it on the outset here, that he's going to, as he dissects this notion of the atzvos, he's going to even reveal to us and explain us that in the end of the day, it's not really atzvos, and it's something which has a source in kedusha itself, in the world of sanctity itself. As the Alter Rebbe dissects this expression, which the Beinani is led to as a result of his reflection and retrospection on the past few prakim, and that ultimately it is what comes out of this reflection is not necessarily klipas nega. As the Alter Rebbe dissects, he's going to show us that it could be something which is directly connected to Dusha, but at this point, the Alter Rebbe did not say this yet. He says, I agree, it's coming from Klipas Nega, but this is Taiv Shebenega, because it's associated with Mili Dishmaya, because of my heavenly relationship, or my relationship with heaven, as we mentioned before. And therefore, it's again not the regular Klipas Nega. This comes from the Taiv Shebenega, as we just explained. Have a wonderful evening.